Jungkook's snap at Jimin makes Taehyung cry silently. The camera stopped rolling, but their secret is finally revealed behind the scenes. If you're not ready, then maybe you should just step out of this part. Don't ruin everyone else's hard work. The words struck like a slap across the face of the studio. The music stopped. Sneakers screeched against the polished floor as movement froze mid-rhythm. Even the ever-present background buzz, the low murmur of staff, the mechanical hum of camera rigs, fell silent. Jimin stood still, center stage, shoulders locked, and eyes frozen on the floor. The lights above made his sweat shimmer, but his face had gone completely pale, as if the blood had drained all at once. Jungkook's voice still echoed, his chest heaving from the outburst. His fists were clenched, the veins along his arms taut like cables. No one had expected it. Not from him, not like this. Not now. In the far corner of the studio, Taehyung sat motionless, a towel half draped across his face. From a distance, it looked like he was merely wiping sweat. Only one person, a sharp-eyed assistant producer, noticed the truth. His shoulders trembled. The towel was not for sweat, but for tears. Earlier that morning, the rehearsal space had smelled of liniment oil, fabric softener, and tension since before dawn. Their biggest concert of the year was only weeks away, and everything had to be perfect. No slips, no late formations, no missed beats. Every move counted. And Jimin was off. It wasn't a matter of laziness. He was drenched in sweat, his breath sharp and shallow. But his timing had been just a half second behind during the new routine's most difficult segment. Again and again, Jungkook, positioned beside him in formation, had noticed each mistake. His glances had grown sharper, his jaw locked tighter. The other members tried to smooth things over with jokes or quiet patience. But something inside Jungkook had been simmering, and it finally boiled over. His voice cut through the studio like a blade. If you're not ready, then maybe you should just step out of this part. Jimin didn't respond, didn't move. His lips parted just slightly, as if a response had tried to form, but nothing came. Only silence. The cameras stopped rolling. Normally, every moment was documented, for content, for behind the scenes, for fans. But at that moment, the director gave a quick nod to the nearest camera operator, and they powered down. Not out of discretion, but instinct. What was happening was no longer performance. It was something raw, something the public was never meant to see. And in the corner, where no one was watching, Taehyung was quietly breaking. The fallout the next day, rehearsal was canceled without explanation. Jungkook vanished from the dorm for hours. No one knew where he went, and he didn't answer texts. Jimin, meanwhile, didn't leave his room at all. Even Seokjin's attempts to coax him out with food, usually foolproof, fell flat. The group chat stayed silent. Staff walked on eggshells. There were whispers, theories. But no one knew what had really happened except those who had been there. And even among them, no one spoke of it. Not yet. A week later. The interview, they were filming documentary footage for the concert DVD when Taehyung was brought into the solo interview room. The lighting was soft, the background neutral. He sat down, his features unreadable, that he didn't speak for nearly a minute. Just stared past the lens, blinking once, twice. Then, in a voice low and cracking with unspent emotion, he finally said, when Jungkook said that to Jimin, I knew it wasn't just about the dance. It was about everything they've never said to each other. And watching Jimin get hurt like that, it felt like watching two of my brothers destroy each other. The producer behind the camera froze. The crew exchanged glances. No one asked follow-up questions. No one dared. The silence afterward was heavier than any explanation. This footage, of course, never made it into the final edit. But the truth slipped out weeks later. A rough transcript of Taehyung's interview was leaked anonymously by a former intern editor. It spread like wildfire across fan forums, then Twitter, then global news sites. Hashtag, we need to talk about them, trended for 3 straight days. Fans rewatched concert footage and noticed the tension. The lack of interaction. The forced smiles. But more than anything, they clung to one moment. The final concert, the final song, silent rooms. No introduction. No speech. Just a song. Taehyung, Jimin, and Jungkook stood shoulder to shoulder. Their voices blended with raw emotion, each line loaded with meaning fans couldn't quite decipher, but could deeply feel. Midway through the song, Taehyung's voice broke during a whisper bridge. "I'm sorry for all the things we never said." The arena was filled with cheers. But among them, many fans wept. They didn't know exactly what had happened behind the scenes. But they knew that song wasn't just a performance. It was an apology, a confession, a thread trying to sew back what had torn. The dorm was quiet, too quiet for a place that once pulsed with laughter and late-night singing. The only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of the wood floor when someone shifted in bed or paced alone in thought. Taehyung hadn't slept. Not really. He lay awake in his room, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun in slow, deliberate circles. His eyes burned, not from tiredness, but from memory. Every time he blinked, he saw it again. Jungkook's voice raised, Jimin's face crumbling, the weight in the room when no one spoke. He hadn't spoken to either of them since 2 days later. It was late when the knock came. Tentative, almost apologetic, Jungkook stood outside Taehyung's door, hoodie up, face pale and unreadable. His eyes were rimmed with shadows that hadn't been there before. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jungkook said, voice barely above a whisper, "Can I come in?" Taehyung didn't answer, just stepped aside and let him in. The room was dim. No music played. No lights beyond the glow of a single bedside lamp. It felt like a confessional, like they were about to say something sacred or dangerous. Jungkook sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled slowly. He didn't look at Taehyung. His fingers pulled at the drawstrings of his hoodie, knotting them and unknotting them in endless loops. "You saw me," he said finally. That day, Taehyung sat across from him on the floor, knees pulled to his chest, silent. Jungkook let out a bitter breath, half a laugh. "I lost it. I didn't even realize how far I'd gone until I saw Jimin's face. And then, he stopped, shaking his head. Why didn't you ever tell me that?" Taehyung interrupted. Jungkook looked up, confused that Taehyung's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "That you've been carrying all this." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, like the space between two truths that had never dared to touch. Jungkook looked down at his hands. His voice cracked when he spoke again. "I thought I was supposed to handle it." Flashback. 1 year ago, Berlina cramped hotel hallway. 2 a.m. Jungkook and Jimin, standing inches apart. Voices low but sharp, edged with frustration. Taehyung had passed by, headphones on, and paused when he saw them, that he couldn't hear much. But he caught enough. "You always act like you're okay, but then you freeze when it matters." "I'm doing my best, Jungkook." "Then maybe your best isn't good enough." It had haunted him since they'd never talked about it afterward. Not one word. But things hadn't been the same since. Moments of forced eye contact. A pause too long when one entered the room. Smiles that never reached their eyes. Back in the present, Taehyung leaned his head back against the wall and sighed. "I kept thinking we used to tell each other everything," he said. "Even the dumb stuff. Remember when you cried because you thought the ramen water smelled like Jin Hyung's cologne?" That pulled a real laugh from Jungkook, rough and unpolished. "And now," Taehyung continued, "I watch you carry all this. Expectations, pressure, guilt, and you don't say a damn thing. You just keep performing. Like it's your job to be unbreakable." "I thought I had to be," Jungkook muttered. "Who told you that?" There was no answer. Across the hall, Jimin's room, the door hadn't been opened in over 2 days. Food deliveries left untouched. Messages unread. Even Namjoon had given up trying. Only Hoseok had knocked softly and whispered once through the door, "Whenever you're ready, we're still here." Inside, Jimin sat curled against the wall, hoodie pulled over his knees, his phone screen still lit with the last message Jungkook had sent. "I'm sorry. I just snapped. It wasn't fair. You didn't deserve that." He didn't reply. Not because he didn't believe Jungkook meant it, but because the apology didn't undo the way it made him feel. Like he was a burden, not a brother. He had always feared that deep down, Jungkook didn't trust him on stage. That he was the one who always had to catch up, always a step behind. That day, Jungkook had said it out loud, and that made it real. Midnight. The studio, the rehearsal space, was empty now. Lights dimmed, mirrors cold. But Jimin stood in the center alone, barefoot, hoodie sleeves pulled over his hands. He hit play. The track started, silent rooms, just the instrumental. Nobuka se dan slowly. Imperfectly. One step late. One breath off. But there was something honest in it. Something broken. Beautiful in its fracture. Behind him, a reflection moved. Jungkook had come in, silently. He watched, unsure if he should interrupt. But when Jimin stumbled on a turn, Jungkook's instinct overpowered his hesitation, that he stepped forward. Caught Jimin's elbow mid-movement. Stabilized him. They looked at each other, and oh, music now. No words, just breath. Then Jungkook whispered, barely audible, "I didn't mean to say it like that." Jimin swallowed hard. His eyes glistened. "But you meant it." Jungkook nodded. "Honest." Jimin looked away. "Then maybe we both need to say the things we've been trying not to." A long silence. Then Jungkook asked, voice trembling, "Can we start over?" It always started with a knock. Not a loud one. Not urgent. Just a soft, careful rhythm that said, "I don't want to disturb you, but I'm here." That night, in Berlin, it had been Jimin standing outside Jungkook's hotel room, knuckles hovering just long enough before he finally tapped. June 2023, the corridor was dim. Rain smeared the narrow windows at the end of the hallway, casting watery streaks across the carpet. Most of the team was asleep. They had just wrapped a back-to-back promotional circuit in Europe, and exhaustion hung on all of them like a second skin. But Jimin couldn't sleep. The weight in his chest had grown heavier each night. After each performance, after every moment, Jungkook looked at him on stage with something that wasn't quite annoyance, but wasn't warmth either. That he knocked. Once, then again. The door creaked open. Jungkook was in a black t-shirt, hair messy, headphones still tangled around his neck. He didn't look surprised to see Jimin, just tired, as if he had expected this moment and had dreaded it. "Hyung." His voice was flat. "Can I come in?" A pause, then a nod. They didn't raise their voices. I didn't need to. The silence between them was already screaming. Jimin sat on the edge of the bed. Jungkook leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The TV was still on in the background, the volume low, playing an old performance on a loop. Their own out on the screen, they looked like gods. Confident, in sync. But here in the dim quiet, they were just two boys who didn't know how to say what they needed to say. "I feel like I'm walking beside you," Jimin said softly. "But you've already decided I can't keep up." Jungkook didn't respond immediately. He looked away, jaw working slightly, as if holding something in. Then he exhaled. Slow, controlled. "Because you keep hesitating." Jimin turned sharply. Hesitating. Jungkook stepped forward, the quiet in his voice more cutting than shouting. "You don't trust yourself, Hyung. You second-guess everything. The timing, the movement, your place. And when we're on stage, I feel it. Every time." The words weren't cruel. They were clinical. Truth, stripped of emotion. Jimin flinched. But he didn't break. "So what?" he asked. "You've been dancing beside me for 10 years, and only now you say that." Jungkook said nothing. That silence said everything. That it was never just about dance. That night in Berlin was the first real fracture, and neither of them ever brought it up again. Not during rehearsals. Not during tours. Not during birthdays or group dinners or the 1,000 little moments where something unsaid lingered between their smiles. But Taehyung remembered. He had seen Jimin come back to their room that night, eyes red, lips pressed shut. Taehyung hadn't asked questions. But from that night on, he watched the space between Jimin and Jungkook grow, molecule by molecule, until the blow-up in rehearsal a year later made it explode. Present day. The rooftop, the city, buzzed below like static. Jimin leaned against the rooftop railing of the practice building, a beanie pulled low over his ears, eyes staring blankly at the Seoul skyline. The wind was sharp. He welcomed the sting on his cheeks. It felt like something he could control. Then he heard the door creak, open. Taehyung in words. Just his quiet presence. They stood side by side, the silence between them not cold, but comfortable. "I remember Berlin," Taehyung said. Finally. Jimin didn't look at him. Just nodded. "I should have said something then." Taehyung added. But I didn't know how. I thought maybe you two would sort it out. I thought I was imagining it. You weren't. Jimin turned to face him. His expression wasn't angry, just tired, honest. I've been trying to prove something to Jungkook for years, he said. That I could be his equal on stage. That I deserved to be there beside him. And every time he looked at me like I wasn't enough, it just added another crack. Taehyung put a hand on the railing beside him. Steady. You know that's not the truth, right? Jimin almost laughed. You sure? Yeah. Taehyung's voice was firm. Because I've watched you tear yourself apart for this. And if anyone has ever questioned your place, they've never really seen you. The wind whipped harder. Neither of them moved. Meanwhile, Jungkook's studio, he hadn't been able to sleep. Instead, he had locked himself in his home studio, staring at the blinking cursor of an unfinished lyric sheet. A song idea had come days ago. Something quiet. Raw, not meant for the charts. Just a confession, wrapped in chords. The title blinked on the screen, Silent Rooms, Demo 1. He hit record, a single piano note. Then his voice low, unpolished. I shouted because I didn't know how to whisper, push you away to see if you'd stay. I waited too long to say it. I was afraid you were already gone. He paused, then pressed stop. His hands trembled slightly, but his chest felt lighter. What if the stage isn't big enough for both of us? Jungkook's words echoed inside the green room. Not spoken aloud, but written on a note, left on Jimin's practice notebook. Not meant to hurt, meant to confess. But to Jimin, it reopened everything. That doubt, that fear, that he was temporary, replaceable, and worse, tolerated rather than needed. Episode 4. The stage isn't big enough. Rehearsals resumed. Cold, clinical, Jimin showed up, always first, always early, practicing harder than ever. Every step precise, every turn clean, but there was no warmth, no eye contact, not with Jungkook, not with anyone. Taehyung noticed the shift. He tried to break the silence. Small jokes, light nudges, but the crack between them had grown into a trench. The director noticed it too. So did the staff. So did the cameras, even though the lenses never turned toward the growing distance. During one session, as the music swelled toward the new choreography of Silent Rooms, Jimin stopped mid-spin and walked out. No words. Everyone froze. Jungkook turned toward the door, but didn't follow. That night, Seoul was hit by a summer storm. Thunder cracked across the skyline. Rain smeared the dorm windows. Taehyung stood in the kitchen, watching the rain blur the city, when Jungkook came in, drenched. No umbrella, just a soaked hoodie and silence hanging off him. Taehyung finally snapped. If you're going to keep pretending this is just about choreography, then don't bother saying anything. Jungkook dropped his hood, his hair plastered to his face, his eyes bloodshot. I'm not pretending. I'm just scared to say it wrong again. Taehyung approached him slowly. Calm, but fierce. Then say it broken. Say it ugly. Just don't let this destroy everything. That night, Jungkook finally knocked on Jimin's door. No answer. So he sat outside, back against the wall, whispering through the wood. You're not a burden. You never were. And still, silence. 3 days before the concert, the members were called in to record short behind-the-scenes interview clips. Jimin walked in, face unreadable. When the producer asked, "What does this song mean to you?" Jimin stared at the floor. It's not just a song, he said. It's what we never said. Across the hall, Jungkook was recording his clip too. I wrote it hoping he'd hear what I couldn't say to his face. The staff asked. Jungkook paused. Jimin, my brother. That night, Jimin opened his notebook and found another note, slipped in between choreography pages. The stage isn't big enough for both of us if we're standing apart. But if we stand together, there's no stage in the world that can hold us. For the first time in weeks, Jimin smiled. And when the final rehearsal came, he walked to the center. Jungkook stood across from him. The music started. Their eyes and O words, but the dance said everything. The studio lights felt harsher the closer they got to concert day. During one of the final camera-blocking rehearsals, they ran Silent Rooms again. This time, it was different. Jimin didn't falter. Jungkook didn't flinch. They moved like twin echoes, still slightly out of sync, not because they were broken, but because they were carrying different versions of the same memory. Every step wasn't just choreography anymore. It was an apology in motion, a wound reopening to finally be cleaned. After the music stopped, no one said anything. Even the director didn't yell cut. Jimin walked off the floor first, sweat dripping down his temple, breath uneven. He passed Jungkook without looking at him, but their shoulders brushed, and for the first time in weeks, neither of them pulled away. That night, Taehyung found Jungkook sitting alone in the dorm's rooftop laundry room, eyes fixed on the spinning dryer, earbuds in. He didn't notice Taehyung at first, but when he did, he simply said, "Do you think he'll ever forgive me?" Taehyung didn't answer right away. He just sat beside him and said, "He already is. He just hasn't figured out how to say it yet." Jimin, meanwhile, was downstairs staring at his screen. A new file had appeared in the group's shared folder. No label, just a timestamp. He clicked it. It was a voice note. Jungkook's voice. Unedited. Raw. "I didn't mean to question your place. I only ever question mine. Because standing next to you, I've always wanted to be better. But I said it wrong. I said it like I resented you. And I'm sorry." Jimin sat frozen for minutes after it ended. Then, quietly, he started writing. The next morning, he slipped a folded page into Jungkook's lyric notebook, point one line. "Then let's say it right this time." From that moment, something shifted. Not fixed, but softened. They didn't talk about Berlin. They didn't talk about the note on the practice floor. But in each rehearsal, each shared glance, something unsaid was becoming something understood. The night before the concert, the group gathered on the stage after the final tech run. Empty seats surrounded them. Thousands of them waiting to be filled with light sticks and screams and tears. Jin clapped his hands once. "Let's be real. What happens after this might be the last of its kind." Namjoon nodded solemnly. "So if there's something left to say it now." No one spoke at first, until Jungkook looked at Jimin across the circle. "Hyung," he said quietly, "thank you for not giving up on me, even when I forgot how to believe in you." Jimin didn't cry. He just stepped forward and pulled him into a hug that said more than any lyric. And behind them, Taehyung smiled. Not because it was fixed, but because it was finally honest. The night of the concert arrived like a storm finally making landfall. The stadium pulsed with energy, the air thick with anticipation, and the stage lights illuminated the members of BTS, who stood before their fans, their family. Everything they had been through, the rehearsals, the unspoken words, the silence they had lived in for far too long, came to a head as the opening notes of Silent Rooms began to play. Jimin stepped forward, his heart hammering in his chest, his body trembling not from fear, but from the weight of what this moment meant. This wasn't just a performance. This was a declaration, a truth hidden in the rhythm of the song, the unvoiced apology that had been written between every step they had taken together. Jungkook stood beside him, their movements synchronized in a way they hadn't been before, each motion a silent acknowledgement of everything that had passed. For once, it didn't need to prove anything. The music flowed between them, no longer a battlefield but a bridge. They danced, not to the crowd, but for themselves, as the song built toward its final, haunting crescendo. Jimin and Jungkook's eyes met in a moment of raw vulnerability, an understanding without words, a reconciliation long overdue. For the first time in years, there was no tension between them, no unspoken distance. There was only the truth, held in every note, every move. When the music stopped, the silence was deafening. The stadium held its breath, but the members of BTS didn't need to hear the applause. They had already found something more important, each other. Backstage, after the final curtain call, Jimin and Jungkook stood together, side by side, the weight of the world lifted off their shoulders. The tension that had haunted them for so long had finally shattered. Jimin turned to Jungkook, his voice low but steady. "I should have told you sooner. I've been afraid. Afraid of being replaced, afraid of losing this, afraid of being nothing." Jungkook swallowed, his gaze soft but steady. "You were never nothing. You were the reason I kept going, Hyung. I just didn't know how to tell you without ruining everything. I kept pushing because I thought I needed to be better than you. But I was wrong." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The words hung in the air, finally set free. Taehyung stepped forward, offering a quiet smile as he watched the two of them. No longer just bandmates, but brothers. The night ended not with the flash of cameras or the roar of the crowd, but with the quiet satisfaction of something repaired, something healed. There was still so much unsaid, but the music had given them the space to finally say what needed to be said, as they all gathered together for one final bow. The stage lights dimmed, and the crowd's cheers filled the air like a tidal wave. But in the silence that followed, they knew something more important than applause had been won. The truth was out, and it set them free.